Nice to see you. Man would not be in space if it wasn't for one little dog, a dog called Laika. It was thanks to this dog that mankind made a huge leap in technology. But how exactly did it happen? How did one little dog literally change the whole world? Get comfy, we're going to tell its story. Before man went into space, scientists talked a lot about the dangers of such a flight. One theory was that human organisms can simply not withstand long periods of weightlessness, overloads, and other things. For several years, the scientific community had been arguing on the topic. American and Soviet scientists were experimenting, sending a variety of living things, from flies to monkeys. But it wasn't Laika's heroic deed that people remembered most of all. Why? It was the only one who was deliberately sent to death. At the time, the USSR and the United States were actively competing in all spheres, including space. It was called the space race, and the heads of state would do anything to get there first, even to send a poor dog into orbit knowing that it wouldn't return. Some modern researchers believe that Nikita Khrushchev agreed only because he had never had a dog. The decision was made in 1957, and the search for a suitable animal began. These spacecraft at that time were not very spacious, so the dog had to weigh about 15.5 pounds and not exceed 14 inches at the shoulder. Biologists considered pedigree dogs too soft. They recommended to use stray dogs that had passed the harsh survival school. As a result, future astronauts were recruited from the streets. Smooth-haired dogs were the best to install sensors, and spotted ones looked good in the photo. 3 dogs were chosen from many others: Albina, Luca, and Laika.
The dogs' names are Muha, Laika, and Algina. These dogs were especially trained with special equipment for their space travel.
But the first 2 were rejected for various reasons, and Laika got her ticket, which you can't really call golden.
But the choice fell on Laika because she showed better aptitudes during preliminary tests.
It's amazing how the people involved in this project were able to do something like this. Sending a dog to a certain death requires iron nerves or no heart at all. However, the researchers weren't ruthless. One of them took Laika home for a bit during flight preparations. "I wanted to do something good for the dog," he remembered later. Would Laika have agreed to participate in all this if it understood what they were going to do to it? I don't think so. But the dog didn't have a choice. The surgeons implanted a breathing sensor on its ribs and a pulse sensor near its carotid artery. Laika had to go into orbit inside a capsule the size of a washing machine.
This is the cabin for Laika. It has been comfortably outfitted for her flight.
There was also an automatic feeder and a device that generated air. It was designed for 7 days of work. The dog was supposed to die quietly after a portion of poisoned food, as no one knew how to bring it back to Earth. Sputnik 2 was not technically designed to land. The spaceship took off and it scared Laika. Sensors detected that its heartbeat was 3 times the normal rhythm, and its breathing accelerated 4 times. It would have experienced much more of it if it understood what was going on around it. The launch didn't go according to plan. The blanket was broken, and the temperature in the cabin rose to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. How long can you stay in an enclosed heated space and not be able to get out? Won't you go crazy? Laika was holding on. After 3 hours of weightlessness, it calmed down a little, and even ate. But too much heat and stress were fatal for the dog. About 6 hours later, the instruments detected cardiac arrest. But that's not the end of the story. The Soviet Union just couldn't admit that Laika died before the deadline. That would have meant the failure of the operation, and then a lie came to the rescue. Officials started claiming that the dog was fine, that it was still in orbit, and the media even published data on its condition. The official documents were falsified. Laika's death was only mentioned 9 days later. Everything goes according to plan, yes. The dog died, but for a cause. Hey, do you even want to send a man to space or not? Just kidding. It wasn't until 5 months later that the ship with Laika's remains aboard escaped from orbit and burned into the atmosphere, reliably destroying all evidence. Yes, the unfortunate dog continued to suffer inside a burning container even after death. And even if the world community was outraged by such a barbaric method of studying weightlessness, everything was quiet in the Soviet Union. In any case, no one took the risk risk of making official statements. After all, the main thing is the knowledge that people gained. Now, mankind was convinced that a living being could carry overloads and be in orbit. Yuri Gagarin's flight into space was approaching. What about Laika? In its memory, the Soviet Union has released cigarettes. Fascinating. Only after the collapse of the USSR did the whole truth about the fatal flight come out. They say many of the people involved in Laika's death still blame themselves for it, and you know, that's fair. I mean, space is awesome, of course, but not at the cost of a life of an innocent creature who didn't choose this path. So there's several monuments and memorial plaques in honor of Laika. Nowadays, you could say she's taken her place among the people who conquered space. But she wasn't the only animal who gave her life for the distant stars. According to official data from 1948 to 1961, 48 dogs, 15 monkeys, and 2 rabbits made their way into space. 27 animals died due to accidents and various unforeseen circumstances. Some of them were lucky. Belka and Stroka, no less famous cosmonaut dogs, made a flight of more than 25 hours, and they returned to Earth. A few months after the flight, Stroka had a healthy offspring of 6 puppies. One of them was given to John F. Kennedy. For the rest of their lives, Belka and Stroka lived at the State Research and Test Institute of Aviation and Space Medicine. Both dogs died at a very great age. But it wasn't just the Soviet Union that sent animals into space. In 1950, mice flew to the stars with both successful and unsuccessful launches. All these little rodents were nameless, so hardly anyone cared about them. The other thing is Ham, a chimpanzee named Ham, had to prove that a person could not only stay conscious during a flight, but also perform some tasks. It was taught to react to light and sound, and then in 1961, it was sent on a suborbital flight.
All 3 start final lights are correct. Let we go. Evacuate lights on. T-minus 8, minus 10, 9, 0, 1 second. Lift off.
The experiment showed that Ham fulfilled the task and acted only 1 second slower than on Earth. Upon its successful return, the chimpanzee settled into a zoo where it lived happily for about 17 years. It occasionally appeared on television and even starred in a film. Ham died at the age of 26 years old, and his remains were buried in the Museum of Space History in New Mexico. Colonel John Stapp even spoke at its funeral, so Ham was treated like a person. In 1970, frogs were sent into space, not just for fun, but to study the effects of weightlessness. Scientists wanted to test how the human equilibrator sense could cope with it, so they started with frogs. In fact, it makes a lot more sense than it sounds when you think about it. We're much more alike than it may seem. The first fish went into space in 1972, and it was hardly delighted. To keep it from getting bored, scientists added 2 garden spiders called Arabella and Anita as company. At the same time, scientists wanted to see if they could weave a spider web in weightlessness and how different it would be. And you know what? The girls did it. It took them some time to adjust to the weightlessness, but after a day, Arabella made its spider web. Creating a second web proved to be more difficult, but the spiders coped with it as well. Unfortunately, both of them didn't survive the flight. They most likely died from dehydration. When scientists were given the opportunity to study the spiderweb, they found that space webs were thinner than on Earth. Moreover, in some places, the spider web suddenly changed its width, something that had never happened on Earth. Who knows what guided the spiders in space? In 1990, China launched guinea pigs into space, but after that, people were less and less likely to use mammals. Now it's mostly insects and amphibians, well, except the countries that are just starting to explore space. In 2013, Iranian news agencies reported that Iran sent a monkey to a height of 72 miles. True, even the most advanced space explorers continue to use mice. SpaceX missions regularly take away dozens of rodents from the ground surface to subject them to a variety of experiments. Very different ones, from stress checks and loss of muscle mass to cutting. Poor mice always suffer for science. At the time of the creation of this video, the last animals sent into space were fruit flies, or rather their eggs, which are expected to hatch and produce carbon dioxide and behave as they do on Earth. But aboard the Chinese automatic interplanetary station Chang'e 4, it landed on the far side of the moon, thereby bringing life there. Perhaps it's this journey of fruit flies that will allow us to explore space farming in the future. Well, now you know a little bit more about space. Everyone has their own opinion on this participation of animals in space exploration. On the other hand, it's really cruel. But on the other hand, without animal testing, the first days of space exploration would have ended in a huge number of human sacrifices. These animals served their countries in ways that no human could. Even if they didn't realize it, they gave their lives for technological progress, so we can only say thank you. So look at the stars more often, and don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it. We made it especially for you.
The imminent travel of man into space, it is necessary to learn the effects upon the living organisms during such a flight beyond the limits of the stratosphere. The animals are placed into special cabins. The cabin is placed in the nose of the rocket. The four-legged passenger feels quite well.